Talking about a new study that was just published a couple of months ago, and it is showing the evidence that the gut microbiome plays in development and progression of multiple sclerosis. If we haven't met, my name is Pam Bartha, and I'm the author of Become a Wellness Champion and the founder of Live Disease Free. It's hard to believe that over 35 years ago, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And by the grace of God and a lot of work on my part, I learned early on that the MS that I was dealing with was caused by a parasitic infestation. I didn't call it that back in the day because I didn't realize what type of microbes, but I knew that I was dealing with infections. Thanks to the work of some hero doctors that wrote books over 30 years ago, probably closer to 40 years ago. Crazy. And we really haven't moved much forward in that direction until now. So today we're going to talk about this new research, or the study, I should say, that's pulling together current research showing how microbes are involved in the development and progression of MS. The title of this study is called The Role of Gut Microbiome in the Pathogenesis of Multiple Sclerosis and Related Disorders. And this study, what they did is they just looked through different databases. So they looked through PubMed and also Medline and Scopus, and they identified several studies that showed the involvement of the gut microbiome. That just means that's actually the genes, the genetic makeup of all the microbes that live in the gut, and really linking that with how they are linked with multiple sclerosis and related disorders. So they identified they identified 11 relevant bacteria. And what I thought I would do is just quickly talk about what we know about how these different bacteria impact our health. And we can kind of think like, okay, is this really related to multiple sclerosis or not? So the first one is Pseudomonas. So Pseudomonas in humans, if we have an infection, it really depends on where the infection is as to what types of symptoms we're going to have. So if we have a wound, then we may end up with pus in and around the wound. It can cause swimmer's ear, where we would have earaches. It can cause pneumonia, where you have a cough, a fever, and fatigue. It can also cause septicemia in the blood, which would make you feel really, really awful. So like that's infection in the blood. And also it can basically cause like high fevers, chills, confusion, and shock. So those type of symptoms, although they may be secondary health issues that those of us that have multiple sclerosis might deal with occasionally, like maybe we might have swimmer's ear, we may be more susceptible to pneumonia, et cetera. That's not really what's causing MS. So we're not really linking what the evidence that we have about Pseudomonas, it's not really being linked back to like neurological disorders. Not to say there can't be interactions between, but I'm just looking for really like surface evidence. Then let's talk about mycoplasma, which is the second one. And so basically, these are different types of bacteria that they know are out of balance in people that have MS. So with mycoplasma, it can cause infection in the respiratory tract, the urinary tract, and also the genital tract. So if it is in the lungs, so it can cause lung infection, walking pneumonia. So this is where we might have a dry cough, fatigue, fever, headache, sore throat, could have mild cases of bronchitis or pneumonia, but rarely people are hospitalized. We can also have the mycoplasma infecting the reproductive organs. So these would be more symptoms that you would see in sexually transmitted diseases. But then mycoplasma can also live in the in the reproductive organs. That would have been related more to sexually transmitted symptoms. And then also mycoplasma can affect the urinary tract. And that would be more in people with weakened immune system. And those of us that are on the disease-modifying drugs, we have weakened immune system, but also just because we're dealing with a parasitic infestation, our immune system is definitely weakened. So those are basically the types of infections in a general sense from Mycoplasma. It is contagious. So then you would think that if it caused MS and it's contagious, then our family members would be more prone to multiple sclerosis also. So I don't really think that so although like these bacteria that we're talking about, they may be increased or decreased in MS patients, they might give us like a secondary bacterial infection. We might have other symptoms, but it doesn't look like the ones so far could cause things like spasticity and numbness and drop foot, poor balance, all of those kind of infections. Obviously, if they're in the central nervous system, it might be different. And then there is Haemophilus. That is a type of bacteria that's normally found in the upper respiratory tract, and it rarely causes disease. It's in childhood, it can be mild or serious infections, so bacteremia, meningitis, pneumonia, sinusitis, ear issues, cellulitis, epiglottis, and it can cause endocarditis and also all the itises are all inflammation, so heart, ear, etc., sinuses, and urinary tract in adults, but not as common in adults as children. Then there is, just let me see here. I just want to make sure that that I'm in the right spot here. You guys type your questions in the question box. I just want to make sure that you guys can hear me. Let me just double check. Just want to make sure it's good. Good to go here. Yes, perfect. All right, I will carry on. All right, so the next bacteria is Blottia. Hopefully I'm pronouncing them correctly. And so this is a bacteria that produces butyric acid, acetic acid, and it decreases obesity. And there's research that's really looking at this type of bacteria that it could potentially be really helpful for like a probiotic. So it might be a good bacteria and also really helping to alleviate metabolic syndrome. So that would be like prediabetes. So that is a bacteria that is beneficial, not showing that it could cause neurological symptoms. There's another bacteria, Doria. That one is consistent with healthy gut microflora. So it's normally thought to be good to have as part of our health promoting microbes. It's higher, so like it's a lot of these bacteria are present in our body, but at certain amounts. But with the Doria, if it's present in abundant amounts, then we could find that in multiple sclerosis and inflammatory bowel disease. And that suggests, because it's in a higher amount and these conditions are pro-inflammatory, they think that it could be causing more inflammation. And so it could be that in smaller amounts, that bacteria is fine, but in higher amounts, it could be pro-inflammatory. And the next one is Akkermansia, and that is a type of bacteria that when it's present in higher numbers, they're finding pro-inflammatory cytokines. So it's like increasing inflammation. And the next one is Methanobrevibacter, and that bacteria produces methane. And that can affect our mood, it can affect our speech. We could have slurred speech, vision problems, memory problems, nausea, vomiting, face flushing, and headache. So again, like these are all awful symptoms, and some of us that have MS, we might have some of these symptoms, but we're again not seeing bacteria that cause like severe neurological impairment. The next one is, I'm just going through them really quickly, and the reason I'm doing this is because we're doing all this research, and is this research really helping us to get closer to a cure? And I don't think so. I think that, unfortunately, like, I don't know why we're doing this. We'll talk about what their conclusions were in a minute, but go ahead and type any questions that you have. So this next one, it's a disulfo brevo, Vibrio bacteria. This one produces hydrogen sulfide gas. Okay, this one is serious. Hydrogen sulfide gas, especially if it's in the central nervous system, would not be good. So, headaches, poor coordination, ability and attention span, impaired short term memory, and impaired motor function. So, there we're getting closer to a bacteria that could cause more neurological symptoms. And so, this type of bacteria is present in certain GI tract diseases like inflammatory bowel diseases. It's really associated more with Parkinson's disease also. And just as an aside, like in 2015, they started to really see that not just MS, but also Parkinson's disease and other diseases, that they are really linked to changes in the gut microbiome or the gut microbiota. And so they started to there were several very large studies done at that time. So this next one, just a couple more, two more, and then we're done. So this one is Faecalibacterium, and this type of bacteria actually, if it's present in decent amounts, it has anti-inflammatory, or it's present in, let me backtrack. So many studies have shown that this bacteria, if it is decreased in numbers, so if it's not present as it should be, then people have inflammatory conditions. So that's linked with things like colorectal cancer, dermatitis, depression, inflammatory bowel disease, etc. So this would be a good guy. This is a bacteria that you want to have more present, but in MS, it's found in smaller numbers. And then the last one that I wanted to mention is Clostridium perfringens. And that bacteria we've talked about this before. So I did a blog post a little while ago, and it's called Neurotoxin Found in MS Causes Leaky Blood-Brain Barrier and Demyelinating Lesions in Animals. So this Clostridia strain, and I should mention, like with all of these 11 bacteria that they pulled all the studies together from all of these different research data banks, and they looked for studies that were linking, changes in gut microbiome with multiple sclerosis. So each one of these bacteria that I shared with you, that's a genus, meaning that there's many, many, many relatives of that one. So there's in organizing all the living things in the world, we use genus and species and other categories. So the genus would be like a bigger family. They also have families, but genus would be a bigger group. Species would be more like, you can almost think about it like specific cousins. And so when I mentioned these 11 bacteria, there are many, many, many cousins of these bacteria. So it's not just that we could have 11 that are out of balance, but it could be, even with Candida, there could be 20 different types of Candida. So this is the challenge, right? It's really challenging to find which culprits are causing our neurological symptoms in multiple sclerosis. But Clostridia is a strain of bacteria that, and I've done, again, a blog post on Clostridia in multiple sclerosis. Neurotoxin found in MS causes leaky blood-brain barrier and demyelinating lesions in animals. So this is a very nasty bacteria that produces a toxin called epsilon. And this epsilon, it's a neurotoxin, epsilon, and they find it in much higher amounts in MS patients than they do in people that don't have MS. And it moves from the small intestine. So basically we'll have bacteria, the Clostridia bacteria in our small intestines, and then they produce this neurotoxin, epsilon, which leaves the intestine and it goes into the blood, and it really targets the blood-brain barrier, maybe other areas too, but it definitely targets the blood-brain barrier, and it makes the blood-brain barrier leaky. So normally the blood-brain barrier, it really controls what goes into our central nervous system. So it doesn't just allow anything to go into our central nervous system, but when we have this toxin, and there could be other things too that increase the leakiness of our blood-brain barrier. So this Clostridia is a very, very significant bacteria because they find it's much more abundant in MS versus in people that don't have MS. And they also have found that the epsilon can induce inflammatory demyelination in different locations of the central nervous system when animals were immunized with the myelin antigen. So what they did is they have an animal model for multiple sclerosis. Interesting. How do they give MS, how do they give like a type of MS to animals? They inject them with a pertussis toxin from a different type of bacteria. So basically, they have these animal models, and they give them this epsilon toxin, and they found, wow, they have lesions that are very, very similar to multiple sclerosis. And they first detected epsilon toxin in 61% of MS patients and only 13% in controls. So 61% of the MS patients they studied had epsilon toxin that they could detect, whereas only 13% of people that did not have MS had the epsilon toxin. Another study reported 40% of MS stool samples compared to only 0.001% of healthy people contained the specific bacteria, that Clostridia bacteria that produces the epsilon toxin, neurotoxin. So that is definitely getting closer to a type of microbe that can really impact the central nervous system, that can really impact our nerves. But the sad reality is that, again, with this study, I'm going to go to your questions. Let me just see. I just want to make sure that you guys can hear me. If you have, please let me know that you can hear me. I just want to make sure that you can hear me. Let's see, I just want to go there. Yes, awesome. There you are. Sorry, I was just looking at my notes and I didn't see all the comments. So go ahead and type your questions in the question box. I'm going to summarize this why I am talking about this study because we want different. We're sick and tired of the same type of research that really doesn't move the needle forward in finding a cure. So we've on livediseasefree.com, we have a lot of really great posts. So I talked about I've done a post on the epsilon toxin. I gave you the name of that blog post. Also, let me go into their conclusions here, and then I'll give you another couple of blog posts that we did too. But they're concluding in this study where they've kind of looked at all the studies that they can find of how the gut microbiome is impacting the development and progression of multiple sclerosis. And they're like, well, we're doing this because, we maybe probiotics and other things would be really helpful for people with MS. And we have done a blog post a long time ago, not a long time, but like a few weeks ago, and it's called Probiotic Therapy in Multiple Sclerosis. And there are various studies already that show that supplementing with a probiotic can slow down the progression towards disability and improve mental health, cognitive, motor function, and general health of MS patients. That's all known already. So I don't know. It's really frustrating. And then they're like, well, we're also looking at this because we want to look to see if we can find some new disease modifying drugs. Maybe we can find some new disease modifying drugs. And the frustrating thing about that part is like, you're actually reviewing all these studies that show that the microbes that live in our body are out of balance, the dysbiosis, and we know that the immune system is fighting something. We know that the main job of the immune system is to fight infection, to fight bacteria, but also worms and protists and fungi that shouldn't be in certain areas and specific kinds that are disease causing. So we know that the immune system is activated. We know that it's not just our T cells, but it's our B cells and our glial cells or microglia cells. So our whole immune system is activated with multiple sclerosis. It's fighting something. Its main job is to fight infection. And they're not thinking like, well, I wonder if we could find, which specific microbes that the immune system is fighting because we could cure people. No, they're not talking about curing. They're simply talking about how relevant it is, because it, like, looking at the gut microbiome changes in MS could serve or could be used as a biomarker for disease development and progression. How about we just cure people? Or they also say, as well as a potential disease modifying therapy. Like, I just want to gag when I hear this all the time at the end of their study. So, shout out to the University of U of C, University of Calgary, Alberta. They have been doing good work on, getting the conversation on gut dysbiosis with multiple sclerosis. But we're just beating a dead horse here. Like, we're literally just talking about the bacteria in a very general sense, and it's not really doing anything. It's not helping us to get closer to a cure. If we know that certain, like even just the Clostridia species, if it can produce such a terrible neurotoxin, it can make our blood-brain barrier leaky, which will allow different parasites to enter the central nervous system that shouldn't be. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that maybe we should be looking to see, like, what if we could potentially treat Clostridia in these MS patients? How would this impact their symptoms? Would this help dramatically, or would this not help dramatically? Right? So it's like, let's just stop looking for bacteria and let's start looking at the types of bacteria, the types of worms, the types of protists that are out of balance. How do they affect us? How do they cause do they cause neurological symptoms? Is there enough research showing that they can cause spasticity? What do they cause in the central nervous system? What do we see in animal models? Right? Let's look for a cure. And they're like, no, 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 we're not looking for a cure. We're just looking for disease modifying drugs. We're looking for possible markers so that we can follow these patients and just kind of monitor their progression. Like, are you guys tired of this? This is what I said on the last one too. I'm just so tired of this. And I don't know, like, we started the MS infectious disease initiative, and it started off, and I was pretty skeptical. I didn't know that it would carry on, because the people that were involved were, well, one of them, the main person that was involved, really nice person, but really heavily involved with the pharmaceutical companies. I'm not against the pharmaceutical companies at all. We're using parasite drugs to recover. But there is no money in curing people. That, like, it's, let's put it this way, it's not profitable to cure people of chronic disease. It's not profitable, right? You don't get to sell these very, very expensive disease modifying drugs that are $100,000 to $400,000 per year. You literally treat someone within just a few months and they get on with their life, and you have lost a customer. So this is a really big dilemma that we're facing. And just even the 2017 McDonald criteria, I've done a talk on that. We are literally being held hostage in the group of people that internationally that decide how MS is diagnosed and how it's treated. They do not want to look at infections. They feel there's no value in looking at infections. So we need to come up with a different option. And we have the Multiple Sclerosis Infectious Disease Initiative, but I cannot spearhead that by myself. So I do know that I attract healthcare professionals, but I need people like that have a pharmacy background. I need people that have a nursing background, or doctors, or any kind of professional background. And if we had a committee of people and we did a study, let's start doing a study looking at the types of parasites. And we could start simply with, we see very often roundworms are significantly abundant in people with multiple sclerosis. So, just doing a simple study on that, right? And I do know a professor at a university, so it would have to be, and I do know a nurse who took our program, the Live Disease Free program, and she has done research before, so she has some information or has some skills in that area. I do have a science degree, but it's a huge undertaking, right? And then we need people to just fund it, but we can do it on a shoestring, just like Dr. Alan McDonald did it on a shoestring. We can be creative, right? We don't have to have very high paid people. It could be done on a shoestring. I really believe that. And what we need, because we have a system that works, we have a system that is changing people's lives. what is so exciting is we've been doing this for about 10 years. And like one of our students, Lisa May, she is a nurse. She has beat MS for several years. She beat infertility. She is pregnant with her third child. She's opened a wellness clinic, and she's been MS free for years. There's another student, Melissa, and Melissa is started a health food company, and she's been MS free for 10 years. Then there is Sarah, and so if you want to hear their stories, go to our website, livediseasefree.com. You can go to YouTube, livediseasefree.com. Sarah is someone else who's beat MS, and she's writing a book. She's just publishing it this month. Then there's a whole bunch of them. I'm not thinking of them all here right now, but Morella, and she started a podcast. So she's beat MS and she started a podcast. So there are a lot of people that are recovering from MS by treating parasites, and they are starting to spread the word. But what's really going to shift the needle is if we can make like a very simple, evidence based, and even a study that is confirming what we're talking about as far as giving doctors the tools so that they can treat parasites early. So important. And it's not that complicated. Like a general practitioner can do it. It's very, very simple. So this is what I would love to do. If you are a healthcare professional, if you have research background, if you have done clinical studies, if you have medical training in your background, email us at info@livediseasefree.com. If you know people that want to fund projects like this, make sure to reach out. Like we would do everything proper, like a nonprofit. I want to work myself out of a job because this is awful. And then we're attracting people that don't have MS, that just have so many parasites, and they're getting their health and their life back. So doctors need to treat parasites. They need to know that parasites are present in all countries. They're not just present in the underdeveloped countries. There is so, like, why do we have to deworm our animals in our countries if we don't have parasites in our countries? They're in our soil, they're in our water, they're on our food coming in from other countries. People from other countries are bringing them in. We're traveling to other countries. So it's part of life, but except for we're ignoring them, and that's why we're so sick. And it's not just bacteria. So this study I shared with you today was talking about bacteria, but it's not just bacteria. But yes, some of the bacteria can cause a lot of symptoms and neurological symptoms, especially Clostridia and maybe a few others. And yes, they need to be treated, but we also need to treat the larger parasites that infect us with the smaller parasites, the bacteria and the protists, and we need to treat fungus. We need to really, in the general sense, knock back the bigger groups of parasites and build back the health promoting microbes. And that is how I have been able to live MS free, and others have been able. And could we learn better? Like one thing I've noticed too is that if you've had a parasitic infestation for years and years and years, and you do a few treatment cycles and you get the parasites down to the point where you're not really seeing any large worms anymore, and you feel absolutely amazing, and that you're not done. Like what I'm seeing in studies is that, like I've shared with you on a different blog post with levomizole, there was a study where they just gave MS patients, like, I can't remember, one dose a week or one dose a month for 4 years, and it really greatly decreased their progression of their disease and flares, etc. So I think that once you get the parasites down, because they can lay hundreds of thousands of eggs in one day, I think it's really valuable to maybe just treat maybe once every 2 weeks or once a month, just like one dose kind of thing, just to knock them back. But of course, we have to work with pharmacists. We've got to make sure that we're using the right amount so that it does something, but that is helpful. But I think that way you've taken care of the biggest problem. You're symptom free. But then if any eggs are still present or larvae hiding out, that as they start to grow, you hit them and keep them so that they never get to grow really big. And eventually you will have it totally, totally gone. Except, again, if you have animals, if you work in the garden, if you eat produce, you're still going to be exposed. But it's very important to also build back the good microbes. That's very, very important. Build back our natural defense. So, for those of you that are new and this is all new to you, make sure to watch our videos. You'll find them actually, the best place to find the amazing research that I'm putting forward is on our blog post, livediseasefree.com, livediseasefree.com. I'm going to go to your questions or comments. So, hello, Lisa. Hi, Joanne. Hi, Julie. You're so very welcome. Thank you for your kind words. The reason I wasn't here last week was I don't know if you saw Kelowna, British Columbia, or the BC fires. Well, we're in the thick of it. Had a house full of evacuees, and yeah, it was pretty interesting. Our home is fine, and the people that were staying with us are fine, but it was pretty crazy for a while. It looks very apocalyptic. I haven't been in town for a couple of days, but I don't think we're out of the woods, but hopefully the weather has cooled a little bit, not as strong winds. So hopefully the firefighters can get it under control. Hi, Joanne. What causes peripheral neuropathy? Again, it would be the parasites. And one thing that I forgot to mention too is that there is this gut brain axis or brain gut axis. Sometimes they call it either or gut brain or brain gut axis. And that is basically saying that there is this highway of nerves between our intestines and our brain and the central nervous system. So it's not just infections in your central nervous system, the lesions, it's not just the lesions that are causing our neurological symptoms in MS, but also you can have inflammation, you can have the parasites, like the immune system is fighting the parasites in the intestines. That inflammation is like war, and that is causing neurological symptoms because the nerves are connected between our gut and our brain. I also did a blog post on that on livediseasefree.com, and it's called The Gut Brain Axis and Multiple Sclerosis. So this is all research that we are fully covering, and we're just trying to get movement into really treating the cause and getting away from just promoting disease modifying drugs, which don't treat the cause, which don't give us quality of life, and actually cause us to lose our life and die prematurely. So, KF, you're very welcome. I'm trying to not dumb down, but trying to simplify the science. And again, it's not just about giving you a bunch of names of bacteria, but it's like, okay, so you're finding this bacteria. What do we know about this bacteria? Does it cause problems in animals? Does it cause problems in humans, like neurological problems? If it doesn't, that's probably not the main culprit. Maybe we do have some of these bacteria. Maybe we are prone to more respiratory infections because our immune system is suppressed, but that's not what's causing the MS. Are ketones being studied? A ketone diet does reduce inflammation. So K and B, what we do is we follow the Live Disease-Free diet, and the Live Disease-Free diet is low carb, like the keto diet. So what we're doing is we're not as low carb as keto, but we are quite low. Like we're down to 30 to 40 total grams of carbs per day. But with a keto diet, you can have dairy, and that does not work with chronic disease. So the keto diet is, or I should say, low carb diet. You can follow keto, but we like the Live Disease-Free diet better because number one, no dairy, because that will feed the infections, the parasites. So cut out the dairy. Butter's okay, but otherwise ghee would be better, but cut out the dairy. But with the Live Disease-Free diet, between 30 to 40 total grams of carbs, we notice that a lot of inflammation goes down. The parasites love carbohydrates, and as you decrease the carbs, the parasites are less active, inflammation is less. That is the first step in recovery. And then we support the body, and then so we're getting ready to treat, which is the diet and supporting the body. We're having daily bowel movements, we're sleeping well, we're supporting all these areas until we treat, because it's the parasites that cause a lot of sleep disruption and constipation and or diarrhea, incontinence, etc. So when we have supported the body and we've followed the diet, we're feeling a lot better, and then we are energy tested to see which of the treatments test well for us. We're using a combination of parasite drugs, herbs, and oxidizing agents. And the cheapest oxidizing agent, I can't even mention the name here because it is heavily censored, but you can watch we do have a blog post on our website, livediseasefree.com, and that is oxygen therapy in treating parasites. So oxygen. So even if you Google search livediseasefree.com and oxygen therapy in treating parasites, you'll find our blog post. That's a fast way to find our blog post because we've got a lot of really good research. So yes, J and B diet is super important, but we definitely want to avoid dairy. Hello, Lee. You're very welcome. And great job. It's really fun trying to pronounce all these bacteria. Unfortunately, it is all about the money. That's where we're stuck. And again, I'm not against our healthcare system. I'm not against our doctors. I'm not against the pharmaceutical companies. There are times and places where, like for example, treating a parasitic infestation with herbs, we have not been able to do that. The parasite drugs are really, really helpful, but they're being withheld from us. They're so hard to access in certain countries like Canada and Australia and New Zealand, and it's getting harder and harder. And I think that's because a lot of people are figuring out that a lot of different diseases, including a lot of cancers, they're all treated and cured by different parasite drugs. That's what the literature, the scientific literature shows. And if that's the case, then why aren't we using them in treatment? It's so frustrating. So, Lisa's, have a lot of your students been diagnosed with these also? With these bacteria? And what about fungal infections? So we haven't even talked about fungus, but as far as these bacteria, like I personally don't recommend, like if you have a healthcare plan where you could do a stool analysis, it's covered. Go ahead and do it. It's not going to hurt. But to pay for it, to pay $500 to $1,000 to have a comprehensive stool analysis done or DNA, you're not going to find what's causing your problems, and it's not going to be very helpful, and it's a waste of money, in my humble opinion. So that's why I don't recommend. And one of my most favorite mentors, he also said that the testing is so poor because we've largely ignored the parasites. And that's why, just in my humble opinion, save your money in that area. There are certain treatments we can use for bacteria. There's certain treatments we can use for roundworms. There's certain treatments we can use for flatworms. There's certain treatments for protists, and also specific treatments for different types of fungi, whether it's mold or yeast type fungi. So we do it more that way and not trying to find out exactly which genus and species of a specific bacteria we could have, because there's thousands of them. And it would take forever we wouldn't figure that out. So, and as far as fungal infections, it's really common. Fungal overgrowth is always present in people that have chronic disease. Sometimes it's more yeast, sometimes it's mold and yeast, or just mold, especially if they lived in a moldy environment. And then CWL. Awesome. When you're back to your old self, you'll help. Well, I can help you get back to your old self. I don't know anything about you, CWL, but if you have a doctorate in physiotherapy, awesome. What you need, so I don't know if you are one of my students or not. I know that I have a physiotherapist as one of my students right now. I'm not sure, but if you do have some kind of a professional background, please reach out. And I really would like to be part of this. I cannot spearhead this by myself, but I would definitely be willing. If we had a good team of people putting together a plan, I would share everything that we know and all the resources, etc. I would love to do that. So Lisa, so one pathogen in the host can open the door and there can be interactions, absolutely. So like one pathogen could produce something that could benefit another pathogen, which could cause it. So it's a snowball effect. It's so complicated. And two, the microbes that live in our body, they really impact gene expression. So when we're taking or doing this genetic testing, it's so inaccurate because there are so many factors that impact which genes are turned on and off. When you just take the snapshot look at your genetic expression at one time, that doesn't mean that's set in stone. And if you just change your diet, if you change the microbes in your body, if you change your mood, there are so many things that impact which genes are turned on and off. And so that has been pretty futile, in my humble opinion, again, is trying to, like, oh, you've got methylation defects and do all these supplements. I mean, if they help you, fine. But what we have found is just treat the parasites, just correct your microbiome the best you can, and you will have the greatest success in that. Hello, Doris. No, sorry, Craig. Does Ocrevus get rid of parasites? No, Ocrevus is an old chemotherapy drug that depletes your B cells, and your B cells are part of your natural defense against these parasites. So when we take disease modifying drugs that deplete our T cells, our B cells, other immune cells, we are weaker. So then we are more susceptible to cancer, for example, and that's one of the adverse effects of Ocrevus. So please research that drug. It's very expensive, and it is just making people weaker. It's a chemotherapy drug. Adverse effect or side effect could be cancer. All right, and then how do you feel about fasting? Last question. So when you are following the Live Disease Free plan, and we are decreasing the carbs because we want we want to make the parasites more quiet. They're still there. They're not going to die because our body will still maintain a specific blood sugar level to keep us alive. So they'll still feed on that. But when you decrease the carbs enough, then you're not going to get the ups and downs, and the parasites will be more quiet, and they'll produce less toxins. And then we notice that symptoms improve because the inflammation is going down. Then we support the body by making sure we're having daily bowel movements. And there's a whole checklist. We call that the checklist for healing. But if you were to fast, if you were to go low carb and then to fast, you'll find you'll lose so much weight and you will not have energy. Like, you won't feel well. When you're healthy and your microbiome is in balance well enough that you have no disease symptoms and you're in remission for many years, you can do some fasting if you like, absolutely. But when you are really decreasing your carbs, if you're going to do fasting on top of it, you're not going to feel very well. So we would not recommend fasting in the recovery phase because you just want to get ready to treat as fast as possible. And students do that in 3 to 6 weeks. They follow the diet, they support the body, feeling a lot better, and then they start to treat. And they'll do multiple treatment cycles. It could be that if you're fairly newly diagnosed, or maybe you don't have a diagnosis, but you know you got parasites, you're probably got some kind of neurological disease, but you want to catch it early. Those people, just by the prep phase, the diet and supporting the body, they might feel symptom free in as little as 3 months. We've had that quite often. They still have to treat the parasites. They're quiet. But if you had stress or you didn't have enough sleep and you're eating a lot of carbs, your symptoms can come back. That's why you need to treat them. You need to get them out of your body. You need to decrease their presence in your body. We can't sterilize the body, but we can definitely decrease the number of parasites that are in our body to the point where it takes so much pressure off the immune system, then we don't have symptoms and we feel energetic and we feel 10 or more or 20 years younger. It's just crazy how much better you can feel. All right, so with that, I'm going to just wrap it up here. So yet again, this is another study that the good news is they're moving in the right direction. They're talking about the gut microbiome. The bad news is they're just focusing on bacteria, and they're kind of regurgitating research that has come out about the different types of bacteria. Most of them are probably not really the front runners in causing neurological diseases. There are a couple, though. The Clostridia definitely could be a problem because they produce really strong neurotoxins that can really impact our central nervous system, all the nerves, but also the other bacteria that can produce the hydrogen sulfide gas. That's another really bad one. So, but The problem is at the end of this study, once again, they're talking about, well, maybe probiotics could be helpful. We already know that. Well, maybe this knowing that the microbes in the gut are different in MS, maybe that could help us to kind of monitor people's progression, and maybe we can develop some new disease modifying drugs. We're done with that. We've had enough of that. How about we know the immune system is active, it's fighting something. All of the immune cells are involved. What is it fighting? Its main job is to fight parasites, to fight infections. So let's look to see which of these microbes can cause neurological problems in animals or in humans and start narrowing down the parasites that could be causing the problem. And then let's start to do some studies. Let's start to see if we can cure people and again, cure is not a good word, because what a more honest word would be is to restore enough balance so that people are symptom free, that they feel amazing. Because you could be infected with parasites next year or the year after. But obviously there's a difference between, different types of parasites and the level of infestation. With MS, ALS, PLS, Parkinson's, we are really infested. We have severe dysbiosis. We are really out of balance with not just bacteria, but with worms and protists, fungi and bacteria that are causing this perfect storm. And as we correct those larger groups of parasites, decrease them, build up the health promoting microbes, then we can recover. And a lot of people have done that. So if this is the first time that you've found me and you don't know much about this, make sure to check out our website, livediseasefree.com. I have just look at the titles and pick and choose. The nice thing about our website is the videos are condensed a little bit, so they're shorter than these videos. And there's also the references so that you can read or you can listen to the videos. You can click on links. If you like research, you can see where you read more into the different studies, but it will help you to understand what you're dealing with. And then if you're like, I finally found my answer, I know I'm dealing with parasites, then make sure to watch my masterclass training. I share all the steps on what you need to do to recover. You can go to our website and click on I think right on the main homepage, you can click on a little box, and that way you can watch my masterclass training, or the link will be in this video. And it helps you to understand all the steps you need to take to recover from a parasitic infestation. Herbs are not going to be enough. I wish they were. I'll let you know if we figure that one out, but we have not, and we've been doing this for many, many years. And then if you are at the place where you're like, I don't have support, I don't have a doctor that can help me, then reach out to us. You can, after my masterclass training, you can fill out a form and you can see if we have a plan where we help you to access practitioners, we help you to access treatments. Like, we have that all covered. We've been working with students in, I would say, about 20 countries by now for about 10 years. So we have really very creative ways, and it's really neat because more and more healthcare professionals are reaching out to me and they're wanting to collaborate with me. So we really need to put together more resources for practitioners so that they can just take this information and run with it, right? But it's just, we have a lot of experience in helping them to troubleshoot, and that we're like taking it out of my head and putting it on paper so that we can help. That's our goal, is to really make this go mainstream. That is our heart. That is our passion. We want doctors to treat parasites early so that we can avoid the hell that many of us have gone through, that horrible, horrible suffering that we have gone through. So if you need support, reach out to us, watch my masterclass training. You can become a wellness champion. We just had 2 new students in the last couple of days, and we're super excited to support them. And then if you like this information, if you enjoy and you appreciate the hard work that I'm doing in the research, please like, share, and subscribe. That's something you can do. You can help get conversations going on about the true cause of multiple sclerosis, how multiple sclerosis and all chronic diseases are caused by parasites. So with that, I'm going to let you guys go. I hope you have a wonderful week, and we will talk to you next week. Take care and bye-bye for now.